just its underpinnings theologically, etc. So
Yeah, yeah, it
that's
makes
good.
sense of the nuance of it all.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fantastic! Is that how you sort of you just kind of write it all out, and then we're just like, we'll just deconstruct this later and make sense of it?
Well, that's the advantage of fiction, is it
Yeah, of
allows you
course.
to.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I have to say this to you. I'm sort of tapping into the value of fiction at the moment. I'm doing because I just started this sort of branch off podcast. I was gonna actually do it with you. I think I'm just gonna leave it as a one-on-one. I'm just toying with different ideas. But this guy's name's Mark Ajiti. He's actually in Arizona, and funny enough, he lives like 10 minutes away from this guy David Werber, who's been helping me with the podcast anyway, which is really weird. I was just like, you start to get to a point in your life where you just quite literally stop believing in coincidence. It's quite strange. But
Or like I say, coincidence has a name.
well, oh, see, this is why you write books that sell so many copies, my friend. You have a way with words, and it inspires me. It's amazing. You've had, honestly, I mean, I listened back to our conversation so many times, quite honestly, and I was so encouraged. It was amazing.
Thank you.
It was so
I
amazing.
had a great time.
Yeah, it was so good. I mean, we ended up getting like, I mean, I guess it was down to the fact that you blogged it, but it got like 28,000 plays,
Yeah.
It outshined every other episode quite incredibly.
Well, that's cool.
And quite honestly, I mean, I don't think it's just because of who you are. I think the conversation clearly resonated with people, right? Like,
It did. It did, because I get requests for it still.
oh,
So,
wow. Oh, wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, that's amazing. That's so encouraging. And it is encouraging to me because I do what I do because of the conversation. I don't do this for clicks, I don't care. I don't care about the numbers. And I mean, you kind of said the same thing with the Shack, right? You said,
Sure.
you said when you made those first 15 copies, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
you wanted. That was beautiful to hear that. It was so encouraging. I'm in a funny headspace right now. So sorry, I was rambling about story. So I'm doing this atheist kind of interaction on the podcast, and I was getting so tired. I'm not offended remotely by atheists telling me there's no God. It doesn't offend me in the slightest. Honestly, the thing that offends me the most, and I know you'll appreciate this because you actually have a sense of humor as well, is that atheists, when they try to make jokes, they tend to be so boring. Like, it's really frustrating me, genuinely. And so I did this little thing. I've done a couple of episodes so far. I'm just calling it literally like story time. And I'm just like making up these stories on the spot about like, once upon a time, there was a thin-skinned atheist, like just really kind of ribbing and making, jokes. And it's really, it's actually therapeutic. I'm not going to lie. And it's kind of helping me, like the thing that I'm really overjoyed about, quite honestly, my friend Tony, he never laughs out loud at anything I do. And he's telling me that this thing I'm doing is the funniest thing I've ever done.
That's great. That's
And
great.
I'm just like, that is the best compliment ever. When the right people compliment,
Yeah.
it's like, you don't like it. I don't want you to like it. That's the point. Like you do. And it's like, perfect.
I've got a great atheist story if you want one.
Oh, we're recording, by the way. We can just keep talking.
Okay.
Fine.
So my friend Jim Henderson, who lives up in Seattle, he's a ex-vineyard pastor, and he went on eBay one time, and he discovered that an atheist was selling his soul on eBay.
Oh, I know this person.
Yes.
That's him and Meta.
Hemet Meta. Yeah.
I had him on the podcast.
Nice. Well, you know that Jim bought his soul for $504, and it's a recession, but for every $10, Hemet had said that he'd spend an hour in church, and then Matt Casper, who's an atheist, picked up the challenge with Jim, and they went to all these churches all over the U.S. and they ended up writing the book, Jim and Casper Go to Church, which is a really great book. It's just like looking at Christian in a broad sense, Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, Pentecostal, high church, low church, but just looking at that culture through the eyes of an atheist as well as a pastor. So
I love it. I love that stuff. I mean, I spoke to Peter Rollins on the podcast, after sort of hounding him for 4 months on email, but he has all these sort of atheist practices like atheism for Lent and all that, and I actually said to him, I said, quite honestly, I think you have more of an appreciation for the atheist position than an atheist.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
That's
it's
not
just,
unusual.
I
I have a
mean,
friend who says that atheism just eventually takes all the color out of life.
oh, it does. It's it's genuinely depressing me. I mean, we sort of had this fake outrage on Twitter with this other guy, Mark, and we were just kind of ribbing each other and joking, and it was real lighthearted. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't even know if I can do this. Honestly, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I was, and I've sort of reflected to atheists, as I said, your non-belief does not offend me. Your relentless commitment to being right, regardless of any detail or nuance, is what kind of tends to lead to your lack of comedic timing, and that offends me much more.
So, yeah, and I totally get that. I met Matt Casper, right?
Yeah.
So I went down and spoke at the San Diego Book Writers Conference thing, and because Jim asked me to do it. Well, Matt came because he knows that Jim and I are friends, and
Mm.
Matt wanted to meet me, and so the first thing that he says to me when he meets me is, "Hi, I'm Matt Casper, and I want you to know that I'm an unbeliever." And I said, "Oh, no, you're not."
I love it.
And he said, "Yes, I am." I said, "No, you're not."
Mm.
He said, "Yeah, yeah." It's like I offended him or something. And I said,
Yeah,
"No." I said, belief is an activity, not a category. And
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I come from the tribe that made up the categories, and
I love
frankly,
it.
most of the people that I know that are in the category of believer are struggling with a sense of faith, so
Yeah.
and doubt. And
Oh,
so
that's
and
awesome.
he goes like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, just tell me what you believe in." And he said, "You want to know what I believe in?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Nobody ever asked me what I believe in. They always ask me what I don't believe in."
Of
And
course, you hang out with other atheists, presumably.
yeah, and I said, "No, I'd like to know what you believe in." And he said, "Well," he thinks for a minute, and he said, "I'll tell you what. I believe in the way that I love my children."
Wow,
And he said,
wow.
he said, "Paul," he said, "I didn't know I had the capacity to love like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
until I had my own children."
Of
And I
course.
said, "So, well, this is not romantic love. What kind of love is this?"
Mm.
And he said, "Well," he said, "it's irrational. But I would step in front of a bullet without a question
Mm.
on behalf of my children." And I said, "So could you describe this kind of love as other-centered self-giving?" And he said, "That's exactly it."
Yeah,
And I said, "Okay. Well, how about life? What do you think about life?" And
yeah,
Jim had told me that Matt is really into
yeah.
the elegance of the natural order, quantum physics and all the rest of it. So he launches for about 15 minutes. And then I ask him, can someone relate to your children in a way that's simply wrong? I mean,
Mm.
it's wrong. And he goes, "Absolutely," which, as you know, is a good word for an atheist. And, and I said, so far, you have told me that you believe in love, not just
Mm.
any kind of love,
Mm.
but this other centered, self giving love. You believe in life and you believe in truth. And you came in telling me or trying to convince me that you were an unbeliever.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
laughs. He goes, "I know what you're doing." I said,
I love it. It's
"But yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've sort of gone through this really interesting phase with the whole atheism thing, and I mean, Ricky Gervais is my favorite comedian ever. Quite honestly, I adore what he does. I used to actually listen to his podcasts, ironically, and that's probably the reason I even value podcasting, sort of thing. And I mean, he did a movie, sort of a number of years ago called The Invention of Lying. I don't know if you ever saw that, but it sort of had this twist in the movie where it was a world where nobody had the ability to lie, right? And he became the first person that is like the way they kind of sold the idea was that he evolved the gene for lying, right? So he's
yeah,
sort of in this world where he's the only person who can lie, and it's like a superpower, right? In a world where nobody has the ability to lie, and you can, obviously, it's
right. I remember that. Yes.
yeah, it gives you a slight advantage. And so there's a number of sort of key scenes that stick out to me. I mean, the sort of pivotal point where it gets emotional is, his mother is essentially on the hospital bed dying, and he just, it's really profound. I mean, Ricky Gervais can do drama. It's amazing. And he's sort of welling up, and he goes, Mum, he goes, you're wrong about what happens when you die, he says, you go to your favorite place ever, and you can run and you can jump and you can dance, he goes, you used to dance, and it's so beautiful. It's so incredibly beautiful. And these people are just sort of standing around there in awe, just mesmerized by his words, right? Mm-hmm. And then and she's sort of reflecting this really human emotion, which I know you understand, which is like, I don't want nothingness, I don't want to die, I don't want it to end. She's like, it's terrifying and all this sort of thing, and then she passes, and it's just like, tell us more, right? Like, yeah, and oh, sorry about this, hang on. My phone is ringing on my computer. It was new. No, it's really profound. And so he essentially inevitably invents religion, right? And right. It becomes a sort of a key point in the story. And it's funny. It goes on. He has this like mock scene where he's essentially, a reenactment of the Ten Commandments, but except it's on like pizza boxes and things like that. And it's essentially this, it's critiquing a very traditional sort of fundamental God, right? It's like this heaven or hell, like, God, if you do good, you go to heaven. If you do bad, you get the story, right? Yep. But it's interesting, and I've sort of reflected this, as somebody who grew up in this Christian bubble, I saw atheism in many ways as a refuge, right? I was like, maybe this is my, out here. Like, maybe I can find some space here, and I need this, right? And then I start interacting with these people, and I'm going, you're just as religious as anyone else.
Absolutely.
Like, everybody wants something to believe in, and this notion that people remotely want logic over emotion and comfort is just absurd, right? It's just absurd. Like, we're human, we bleed, as Peter Rollins would say. Like, it's just crazy, and it just, quite honestly, doesn't. It just falls short, right? It's just like, we need to. I mean, I spoke to David Van Der Veen on the podcast. Amazing. He's friends of Rob Bell, who I got to connect with, which was incredible. Why these people want to talk to me, quite honestly, it's beyond me. But he sort of, David Van Der Veen sort of said to me, he goes, you kind of have to be an atheist for a little while, And I get that. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that idea, because that intrigued me.
Brian McLaren said something really fascinating not that long ago, and he said, that every movement that we make faith-wise has to go through atheism. That is, we have to come to the place where we deny the existence of the imagination of the God we once believed in order to move to a fuller apprehension of the God we are learning to encounter.
Yeah.
And I think so. I think that's kind of the same idea. Is that for me personally, in terms of my own journey, there came a really great deconstruction of the imagination of who I thought God was. Not that everything was lost in that deconstruction.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But there were a lot of things that were lost in a positive sense. That is, that they fell away. So that the God who emerged in terms of relationship was not very similar to the God that I grew up with. And that's frankly why, the shack is the way that it is because I didn't want my children growing up with the God that I did. And I would rather them encounter the more relationally real and true character of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit than the God that I grew up with. So,
I have to bring this point up because this was one of the key things you said on our last conversation that just blew my mind for a long time. Was the sort of the analogy you drew, the parallel between, pornography and fundamentalism.
Yeah, bad theology.
Like, yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm sure we could dive into it because I'm sure the people that heard the last conversation would love to hear a little bit more on this subject. Like, it sort of speaks to the point that we want this instant joy, right? We want this instant quick fix,
Gratification.
gratification. Of course, you know, I'm choosing my words delicately because I don't really want to dive into the pornography topic side of things, but maybe that's another time, you know, whatever. But it's the parallel was fascinating, and I mean, it really does make such a great point, and I sort of wonder. I mean, this atheism. Sorry to keep railing on atheism, but it's on my radar, right? It's fascinating because it intrigues me the how religious it feels lately. Like, I mean, you've got to the point. I mean, you've got this movement now they call street epistemology, and I spoke to Peter Rollins about this in depth. He's actually connected with one of the main guys who sort of came up with this idea, and it's essentially atheist evangelism. I mean, for goodness sake, they're literally going out doing pretty much what I used to do for 5 years, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm
yeah.
going, I recognize this because I was that guy, you know?
Yeah, you know, it is religious.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
And the thing about it is, and it has its own tenets and it has its own 10 commandments, you know, but
What's
but
the
again,
first one? What's the first commandment of atheism?
That you're wrong. So
actually, literally to that point, to speak to that point, I spoke to a guy whose name's James Lindsay. He's a great guy. He's amazing. He's literally written a book called "Everybody Is Wrong About God."
yeah,
And I was like, I literally did a whole podcast about the book title because I haven't read it, and we talked about it. I was like, I was fascinated, and I was like, I was like, this isn't hyperbole. You actually, and he goes, yeah, and I was like, you think everybody's wrong about God? I was like, surely not, like just not atheists, right? And he goes, oh no, they're wrong too. I was like, oh my goodness.
that's the Baha'i without a God. It's the flip side of the same coin.
I'm fascinated. I'm sort of this you know, explorer of this world, and it's so fascinating. Because
Well, you know, religion is about finding a way to justify yourself, right? So you're looking for a way to justify why you do what you do, and if you can come up with there being no God, therefore no absolutes and no fundamental reality of morality, you're allowed to do whatever you want to do.
Of course.
But now you have a religious framework within which to justify it.
Yeah.
I think that's what we do with categories generally.
Because there's clearly a theology, right? I mean, clearly. I mean,
Sure.
when they mock God, they're mocking a version of God. I mean, I know Rob Bell's big on this. He's like, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And he's like, I don't believe in that God either. On the point of Rob Bell, I saw a video, somebody spoke to him last year, I think it was, and I found a YouTube clip. And he brought up this phrase, he coined this phrase, static appropriation. I don't know if you've heard that. I
have not.
It was amazing. I mean, he was essentially, to speak to the point further, I spoke to a guy named Shane Willard on the podcast. He's amazing. He's this guy that, you know, psychology studied and trained under a rabbi. I mean, he's so incredibly fascinating. And he said this sort of line to me that, you know, if you want to make the Bible ugly, just make it static, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I know you get this. I know you understand this clearly. But, you know, it was fascinating. This term static appropriation, I've totally adopted the term because, and it's so clear in my interactions with these people, you know, is that the God they're mocking is a theology. It's an idea. And I'm going, I don't believe in the God you're ridiculing.
Yeah, it's, to use a different analogy, you know, a lot of us relate to money that way, and in the sense that you're either all about finding security in it, or you're opposed to it. So you have a poverty mentality, but you're just as materialistic.
Of course, absolutely. I've seen that in my own life, my own family, in fact.
Yeah. So again, with the atheist is still absolute. He needs the God to be against in order to have a sense of identity.
Of course, I've said this. I've done this belief series with this guy Lucas. He's actually an atheist as well. He's amazing. He's great. I'm making friends with these people. It's incredible. It's amazing to me. Amazing to me that I make friends with anyone. But anyway, no. I sort of reflected this idea to him. I said, if atheists woke up in a world tomorrow without religion, they wouldn't know what to do with themselves because they'd have nothing to rail against.
Yeah. Well, who are they apart from religion?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? When you term atheist, I mean, you're literally defining your life by who you're not.
Right. Right.
It's a little bit depressing, Paul. I'm not going to lie.
Well, that's why I say it takes the color out of life.
It
It prevents,
does. It does. It
you know,
does.
reduces everything to grays.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and
So,
or you have to come up with some you have to come up with some belief system to fill
yeah,
into
yeah,
the vacuum because
yeah.
it does create a vacuum.
Okay, I want to deliberately transition away from atheism because I'm going to annoy people if I keep talking about it. But I need your wisdom on this subject that I'm about to jump into here. I've basically been in this echo chamber for the last 6 months. In December, I connected with a guy named Milo Yiannopoulos. You know, he's a UK journalist for Breitbart.com, and he is resonating. He's essentially becoming a rock star in the social, media world. It's incredible. He does these speaking events in America on these college campuses, and it's like the internet come to life. It's fascinating. You know.
Mm.
And there's this sort of debate. Have you heard the term social justice warriors?
Yes, but I don't. Not enough to be smart about it.
Okay, so essentially, so it's not hard to fill you in, here. I mean, social justice warrior is essentially a term given to the type of people that tend to want to find reasons to be offended, usually on somebody else's behalf, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've got these people going, "Oh, you can't say that. You can't." It's like language policing and sort of the term trigger warning, like
Sure.
on college campuses now they have this term called safe spaces, and it's kind of a little bit full on. And I've been trying to navigate this conversation and quite genuinely trying to make sense of it all, because I mean it's this reality that 6 months ago I didn't even know existed either. And I'm just going, what is going on here? Like, what the heck is actually happening? And there is a lot, I mean, clearly, and I know to speak to your heart, I mean, there's a lot of broken people in the world, obviously. And it's crazy. And I'm going, I mean, I sort of reflected this to Rob Bell. I sort of started my conversation by saying, you've got, you know, to use a different point, I suppose, but you've got, I sort of listen to even the conversation I have with someone like yourself, or listen to Rob Bell talk to the likes of, say, Elizabeth Gilbert, and I go, oh man, I just want to subscribe to that. You guys just articulate this beauty in the world, and we're all divine spark, and, all that stuff, right? I love it. I love it. I go, yeah, give me more of that. But then I go, I don't know if there was a horrific news article the other day of a woman literally carrying around the head of a 4-year-old child, right?
Yeah.
And you go, what do we do here? Like, where do we even begin, right?
Yes.
And I
You
know
know,
you're the right person to be talking to about this.
and there's no real systemic solution for this. Obviously, politics is not a solution,
Mm,
and militarism is not a solution.
mm,
We're going to end up with community or human solutions to
mm.
address these kinds of things. Like right now, and for $80 US, you can buy a child in Uganda, and the witch doctor will cut them up into little pieces
Oh, God.
and put them in the
Oh.
corner of buildings and dedicate, new construction and new businesses to the spirit being. So it's not like we're that far away from child sacrifice. In the West, we cover it up in a lot more, you know, hymnology, cultural and political
Well, the
nationalistic
word
hymnology.
abortion comes to mind, quite frankly.
Sure, sure, and so we are the perpetrators, and
Mm,
for
mm.
me, the origin of evil is not outside of ourselves. That
Of
that
course, of
we're
course.
the ones that created
Yeah.
evil, and we're the original perpetrators, which means that if we're not just victims in some kind of a massive cosmic war, that we can also be participants in change, because we're not just stuck as victims. If we understand that we're the perpetrators, then the whole movement toward reconciliation, which means that I have to acknowledge
Mm,
with great sorrow
mm.
my participation in the perpetration of these things,
Yeah.
and look within my own heart.
Mm,
It's easy enough to find someone that we can point a finger to at, as a community, That's simple. We can make any categorical group an enemy,
Yeah.
but to look in our own hearts
Yeah, of
and
course.
and,
Of
and to
course.
look why we abuse the
Of course.
people that are closest to us,
Oh,
well,
no kidding. It's,
then we're starting to get down to the things that will change. And I
yeah, of
believe
course. Of course.
that every single incremental change that any individual person
Mm.
makes actually changes the cosmos. So what a person does matters, not just in terms of activism, but in terms
Sure.
of the
Sure.
eradicating from their own heart the
Of
things
course.
that are
And to speak down that path that you've just kind of opened up, I mean, on a very personal level, I've been trying to navigate, close friend and family relationships, given the topics I'm starting to talk about that are very controversial, right? And it's hard. I mean, my brother who lives in Turkey, my twin brother James, um, I literally had a 3-hour Skype call with him, which felt like a sort of a hostage negotiation kind of a conversation where I was essentially like trying to sell him on the idea that I'm not a horrible person because of these topics I'm discussing, sort of a thing.
Mm.
And it's painful and it's bloody and it's messy and it's horrible sometimes. And I would love to dive into the whole family, and because, like you say, the hardest things to navigate are these friend and family relationships. We do say these things to the ones we love that are so hurtful at times, and you sort of become the monster, and it's heartbreaking. And I want to do the right thing. I want to, this guy Milo, sorry, he sort of reflected this idea that I've really adopted, which is, and I said this to Rob as well, he says you can't solve a problem when you lie about it in your first sentence, right?
Yeah, correct.
You know,
Yeah, brilliant.
yeah, exactly. Rob really liked that line too. He's like, oh, that's brilliant, And it seems like, he sort of says that, he's talking politically. He says on the left, you seem to get this sort of narrative over fact kind of a vibe. And of course it's human, right? And it's not, I mean, you're sort of speaking to the whole scapegoating thing where it's so easy to go, oh, if it wasn't for those people, we'd be all right, and it's so easy to do that, clearly. And it's, there's this beautiful quote, actually. Russell Brand said this on one of his videos on YouTube once. He says, the divide between good and evil, sort of, I'm going to butcher the quote, hopefully not, but he sort of says the divide between good and evil lies within every human heart, sort of a thing,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I agree with that.
Of course,
But the question is, what is more fundamentally true about every human heart? Is it the good or the evil? And in order for the world to be broken, there had to be something to break. And we forget about what was there to break to begin with. We look at what is broken and react and respond to that, rather than look for ways to encouraging what was there before anything was broken.
Yeah. I had this moment yesterday. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My friend Jacob, we're working on this music app idea, and he's over here from Australia, and it's quite amazing. It's actually, really going well. It's quite cool. But he's a sort of younger, 25 millennial generation, right? And he's amazing. I adore him. I love him. He frustrates me to no end. He's like a little puppy dog. He asks all the why questions, like why do you feel like it's like he's exploring. It's amazing. I love it. And we're sort of sitting in this park, which is something I never do and I need to do more, but we're sort of looking up at the clouds, and we're just relaxing, and it's amazing. And he's sort of articulating. I asked him the question because we don't talk a lot about sort of faith and spirituality, and I said, "Do you believe in God, Jacob?" And he goes, "Yeah, but he sort of did this thing where he's like, my God is probably not the same as yours, or something to that effect, right?" He's like,
yeah.
And I was like, tell me about this God you believe in. And he went on to beautifully articulate this concept of the divine, and he was just using this really verbose language, and just like, he essentially summed God up as a work of art. Like we're on this cosmic canvas, and it's amazing. But he sort of made this point. I was like, not sure if I can go with you on this one, right? And he goes, I don't think there's an intelligence behind it. And I was like, that's interesting. I was like, there's sort of this nuance to the discussion, right?
Uh-huh.
And I was going, My immediate impulse is sort of justice thing pops up. I'm like, well, if there's no intelligence, there's ultimately no right and wrong, correct? And I'm going, yeah, I can't. Like, of course, to just go, it's all art and everything is here to be enjoyed. Of course, that's a beautiful sentiment. Of course, right? But
Yes.
but then you go, what about all the bad stuff? What about all the pain and the trauma and the things that are unspeakably, horribly evil?
Well, not only that. What about the intelligence that it took to have a sense of the divine that he has?
Of course,
You
of
know,
course.
so my friend Baxter, who's a theologian, would refer to this as self-referential incoherence. And
Self-referential incoherence. I love it.
yeah, I think it's a great term. And but it's that, we create little systems in order to invalidate other ones without realizing that our own reference to ourselves
Mm,
becomes irrational. And so that any intelligence that apprehends the divine would have to be less than the divine, right? So
yeah.
especially if the divine is non-intelligent. So there's some real issues there, and
Oh,
it's
he
just
has
like
issues.
saying that the divine is impersonal.
Yeah, of course, of course.
So personhood becomes a denigration of the
Mm,
divine,
mm,
and it's like, so what's the goal here? To be absorbed, and you know what? That's on the sentimental level, you might make somewhat of an argument for it, but on a relational level, in terms of any relationship of value, you can't. You
yeah.
know, there's no way that I relate to my children that way.
Mm.
I don't see them as moving towards non-intelligent impersonality as a good thing, and and I don't relate to them that way.
Yeah.
In fact, we're doing everything that we can in terms of the celebration of the children in our world, as a parent, whatever,
Mm.
in order to help them reveal the individuality or the unique personhood that they are. So
Yeah.
we're trying to develop personhood, and where does that push come from? Is that part of the evil? I
Yeah,
don't
of
think
course. Of
so.
course. Yeah. It's fascinating. One thing that's on my radar right now, and I'd love your thoughts on it because I'm asking pretty much everyone I can, is this whole subject of free speech, right? Like, it seems to be so, so on the radar of so many people's minds and hearts, especially in the social media age, where I'm not going to go into lots of detail, but it's becoming apparent that a lot of these large social media, Twitter and Facebook and things, they don't tend to they're emerging as people who don't tend to believe in free speech. Quite frankly, I've been very clued into this and very connected to people personally. I mean, I've had people on the pod, Milo, for example. I mean, last January, I think it was, Twitter actually de-verified him.
Huh,
Which is something I don't think they've ever done, right? I don't even know if it's ever happened before. And he,
right.
he, he essentially broke the internet because of it. He was trending globally on Twitter for hours. And he was literally at the White House, amazingly. And there was somebody representing the president. I guess he was answering questions, and he essentially brought this subject up and was like, is there anything the government can do to, like, enforce, to make sure people have free speech and blah blah blah. And it gets very tricky when things like Twitter, for example, are essentially private companies, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I know that I assume that you're somebody that values free speech, given the fact that you wrote The Shack and all the fun that came along with that. Um, and to make the point and to sort of say something worth reflecting on, I guess, Peter Rollins quotes this Irish comedian Dylan Moran, who says, "War is the inability to have conflict," and he's sort of making this point that in the
Yep.
places where free speech is not allowed is when actual violence emerges.
Yeah, in the sense of real communication between persons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that free speech is one of those things where, is it wrapped in what? Is it wrapped in compassion? Is it wrapped in the desire to
Of
communicate?
course, of
Or,
course.
is it a need for identity? Is it a need for personal worth? It is a lashing out? But even in a community that has the the desire to open up the conversation, they also have a desire to create boundaries that protect the innocent or the young
Mm,
or the,
mm, mm.
because words can abuse people, and
Of
become,
course.
and the internet, as beautiful as it is in terms of giving a voice to the one, which I
Mm,
absolutely
mm.
value, it also becomes a place where, um, as an invisible persona, you can say whatever you want to say that is destructive and hurtful.
Of course,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I sort of wonder though. Here's the nuance to me: is yes, speech can be abusive, but I imagine, given what I understand of you as a person, you would have a very different definition of what you would term as abusive speech. To
Correct.
contrast that, there was actually a guy, his name's Gregory Allen Elliott in Canada, who literally the case was just overturned recently. It went on for about 3 years, where he was essentially banned from Twitter for disagreeing with a feminist, essentially.
Well, see, that's to me not abusive speech. That's a conversation.
Of
To me,
course.
pornography is abusive. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
abusive speech
And
because
ironically,
it's,
Twitter has pornography on it.
yeah. But I also know that Twitter and Facebook and Google, they're all working to against it. They're trying to find a way to navigate that in such a way, because it's beginning to be universally a conscience thing
Mm.
that pornography is absolutely linked to trafficking, absolutely linked to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
violation of human beings, and the
Mm.
dehumanization that continues to um, be a fundamental in hurting
Right.
um, the community
Yeah,
of humanity. And so,
yeah.
so again, I am for free speech, and I think that it has to be protected.
Mm.
Um, and we have to come up with new and creative ways to respond to those whose speech
Yeah,
is intended to hurt, because you don't
yeah,
have to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
start a war uh, by shooting somebody.
Yeah.
You can create war
Mm.
um, by abusing them with language. I know, because I'm a little man. I'm not big. I'm like 5'6".
I could pick you up.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a sense in which, well, it's the truth of it is that I've lost every, physical encounter that I've ever been a part of. But what I learned to do, what I learned to do is hide knives inside words. And so I can take a 300-pound man and cut him to shreds, because
I bet you could.
with any kind of insight, um, there is a there is an issue at stake that you now have the ability to hurt someone.
I never
And
thought about it. It's funny you admit to that, honestly, because I never thought about that with you, and I'm thinking that makes perfect sense. I'm like, this is the dark side of articulation, right? Like,
mhm.
that makes perfect sense. Like, you're as human as the rest of us. That's the secret of it all.
And so part of maturity is to begin to find ways
Mm,
to utilize the speech that we have inside the freedom that we have. And the
yeah.
freedom is there to build up rather than to tear down. And that doesn't mean that we don't challenge the systems, because we obviously do.
Yeah.
Because
Sure. Sure.
systems are destructive and they
Mm,
are dehumanizing.
mm, mm.
And but
Yeah.
but there is a sacredness to the ability to communicate. And I think that if we have a low view of humanity, we'll have a low view of what it means to have free speech. If we
Yeah.
have a high view of humanity, we will have a high view of what it means to have free
Oh, of
speech.
course, of course. There's this thing, like, going back to just, I guess I'll wrap up here because I'll keep this one a little bit shorter maybe than the last one. But just going back briefly to the social justice warrior kind of thing, because I want to write a book about it. I actually have this idea for a title, like, I want to just call it like social justice warriors, but like the word worry, like to worry.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, stop worrying. Like, oh my goodness, just stop it. I think it's great. I actually shared the basic idea for it with Kathleen Falsani, who I'm
Oh,
hoping
I
to
know.
on the
Yeah, I know
podcast.
her.
Yeah, and she actually reflected and she goes, I've never heard of social justice talked about like this. And she goes, oh man, you keep going. Like she's like, keep. And so I've got this idea. I can't even think about it right now because I've got so much going on in my head. Do you find, actually on a quick question, do you find as a creative person that it's like famine or feast? Like that you have either too much creativity in your head or not enough?
Nope.
You don't work like that. Okay.
No, I don't work like that. I think it depends on the person.
Yeah, I'm just, I guess it's me. I guess it's my personality. Well, actually, that makes sense that you'd say no to that, quite honestly.
For me, creativity is about all of life. It's not about segmented sections of life. I think every human being's a creator.
Yeah.
So I don't parcel it up like that.
Okay.
If I'm working on something, great. But if and very specifically,
well, they
like
talk about this term flow, right? This idea of flowing, like things just happen and you just kind of go with it.
Yeah,
and it seems like
that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, no, it sort of does to me as well in a strange way. I think, I mean, especially even this idea I'm working on with my friend Jacob, we can't even pinpoint the moment where this idea emerged. We just like, we started talking and conversing and we're just like, this just kind of, and I know actually to make a point and then I'll wrap up, but you know, Elizabeth Gilbert in her latest book, Big Magic, talks about this idea of, she almost personifies these creative ideas and she's like, they just come to you and it's not your fault. You just have to look after them, sort of thing. It's quite amazing, you know. But yeah, so I was sort of wondering, just in closing to make the point on the social justice, where I think I've been trying to wrap my head around where this impulse comes from, and I feel like I get it, because I feel like I nearly became one of these type of people, and because I'm a very empathetic person, you know, by nature, and I feel things, I feel pain, I feel people's sorrow, and you know, things like that, and you know, you'd be well aware of the movie. Obviously, there's a movie the Green Mile with Tom Hanks and.
Yes.
You know, there's obviously the storyline, you know, just to sum it up briefly, obviously there's the guy that, you know, John Coffey, you know, the big black guy, and he's like, you know, he was accused of killing these two girls, right? And then obviously the other guy was, you know, he was the white guy, the young white guy was the guilty guy, and this sort of cuts back to the scene where it's really, really devastating and heartbreaking, and he says to one of the girls, if you don't shut up, I'll kill your sister, right? And then he says the same thing to her. If you don't shut up, I'll kill your sister. And he says this line, and you're probably well aware of this line. You know, he says he used their love for one another against them. You know, he used their love for each other against them.
Yep.
And I just think that sums it up so perfectly. I'm just like, what is happening here? Because what I'm seeing in these people are not mindless zombies or selfishness or, you know, hatefulness. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing good-hearted people that I would say have these, this divine impulse that's kind of being hijacked to care about things that are not the most important things.
Yeah, yeah, or they are important things, but the more important things get put aside.
Well, we're living in this world. I reflected this to a girl named Lauren Southern in Canada, and she was saying she's a very young, you know, political sort of activist, you know, girl, and she said victim has become the new currency. She said you go onto Twitter and they in their bio they sort of list these things like I'm autistic, I'm bipolar, and it's become the new currency, and it seems like people are literally, quite honestly, making things up to be oppressed about. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but
well, I think culturally that there is a period of time in which we need to lament the losses because they were so hidden and repressed, you know.
Yeah,
and,
So is that what's happening? I don't know. Is that what's happening? I mean, just to make the point, I'd love you to close out on this thought. I mean, Milo sort of reflects this idea. I mean, he's sort of similar age to me, and he goes, you know, our generation, we had things like cutting and we had Rage Against the Machine and things like that. And he's like, this sort of younger generation, you know, generally speaking, tend to be fairly privileged people who don't really have anything to rail against, is kind of what he's articulating. and you got to get it out. I know you get this, right? I know, this sort of rage against the heavens and throw your fists up to the sky and like you say, lament. I know Rob Bell did this sort of series about how we essentially are rubbish at grieving,
Yeah.
And he went through the Book of Lamentation. So do you want to just maybe land us in some kind of? I need a profound revelation here.
Wow. Well, we're in a profoundly transitional period of time, and I think we forget that because we have so much access to so much information, but the information is compounding all the time, and I think there is transitional fatigue. We have a generation that hasn't grown up with any kind of affiliation to history or tradition or background, and with the family systems beginning to crumble a little bit, that has unhooked them from their moorings, and so there's a lot of response to that. Well, I'm an optimist. I look at the younger generation, the millennials, and as much as they are,
there's a millennial listening to you right now.
yeah, and as much as they are privileged in some senses, and they can go to a sense of being, what's the right word? Like this is they're due something, right? I mean, a lot of millennials have like 4 major career crises by the time they're 25. And because of transitional worlds, and because there's always a 2.1 and a 2.2 just on the horizon, they have a horrible time making commitments. And I suspect that's more true of young men than it is of young women. And so again, transition, but I see in their heart a desire to be a part of something that is actually real and true and changes things. And so, a lot of the planet never had a voice, so they're just learning to exercise it. And they don't do it maturely, and they don't do it wisely all the time. But the very fact that they're able to do it is a very good thing. And then we're going to have to work with it. So what do we do with our relationships inside the mix of a massively transitioning world?
Yeah, sure.
It also exposes a possibility of fascism at the same time, where people step into that space and begin to tell people how to think because they're so tired of trying to think for themselves in a transitioning world. And this is where the moorings of faith really become absolutely important. There was a study that was recently done on the whole higher education system in Southern California, connected to, I don't know if it was UCLA or USC, but one of them, and they were interviewing thousands of incoming freshmen, and in terms of what things are most important to you. And in an odd switch in the last few years, there is a high percentage, like 75% and above, who are saying as incoming freshmen that faith is becoming something that is absolutely important to them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, and it's because it offers a framework that says there is a way to look at my life that then creates some cohesiveness.
Sure.
And some boundariedness that gives me a sense of who I am. So my identity, my worth, my value, my significance, my security, my meaning, my purpose, my destiny, community can have a sense of meaningfulness. And then purpose is going to emerge out of that. So
you've just literally given me the perfect way to land this conversation. When I spoke to Milo Yiannopoulos back in December, we were talking about this whole social justice warrior phenomenon. He sort of gave me a thumbnail sketch of the whole thing, and he was it's fascinating. But he said to me, this is somebody who's he describes himself as a gay Catholic gay Catholic conservative. He goes, there is going to be a response to this that is profoundly or uniquely Christian, is what he said. And it seems to be proving itself to be very true. Where I think voices like yourself and others, and Rob Bell, his latest book just came out today, literally, How to Be Here, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, and there is a response to it, and there's you're right, and I think it's this lamentation and this sort of a need for healing and wholeness, and there are people, young people. I mean, Jacob. Sorry to make a point. He's here with me now. He's profoundly empathetic and profoundly aware of sort of this need for something more and beyond just the material, and it blows my mind, and it's amazing, and yeah, it does seem to be interesting. So I guess in closing, thank you so much for connecting in. It's been amazing. I think this conversation had such a different feel than the last one, but it's amazing.